UFC 301 just wrapped up, and on paper, this wasn't a super exciting card. It wasn't super stacked, but I feel like this fight definitely kind of overachieved expectations here. We had some fun finishes. We had, two fun decisions at the end of the card. So in this video, just going to be recapping, talking about some of the biggest moments, and I feel like we have to start here with the championship matchup. Pantoja taking on Steve Erceg. A lot of people thought Erceg didn't deserve this opportunity. There really wasn't a great option to challenge Pantoja, but I think he proved that, he was ready for this opportunity. A very, very, very competitive fight. I actually scored it 3-2 for Erceg. I gave 2, 3, 4 to him, 1 and 5 to Pantoja, but 2 and 3 were very competitive. Definitely not calling a robbery here. I don't think it's crazy to score that fight for Pantoja, but it was a very, very close fight. Erceg having a ton of success on the feet, was looking great in the later rounds, and then just going to the wrestling in the fifth ended up costing him. Pantoja, even when he's exhausted, his transitions are just next level. His ability to take the back, just to get out of rough spots, it's really insane. Like, he looked so tired, and it's like he just goes on autopilot when he gets in those transitions, and he really does not lose many of them. So shout out to Pantoja. He defends his belt for the second time here. Not sure what's going to be next for him. Is it Royval a third time? Moreno's taking a break? Is it Muhammad Mokaev? Maybe he just takes some time off, and until a top contender kind of emerges here. I think he's earned it. Took a lot of damage in that fight, the cuts, the elbows, so would expect to see him take some time off. For Steve Erceg, like I said, he proved he belongs at the top level here. He is not the 10th best flyweight in the world, so I think 1 or 2 more wins, he could be right back in there with Pantoja, and I think he'd have a decent shot to take the belt off of him. He's younger than Pantoja, with a little bit of experience. The fight IQ kind of cost him here. Only his 4th UFC fight. He's going to be back, and he's going to be better. I think probably the fight that people were actually most excited for on this card was the return of the King of Rio, Jose Aldo, taking on Jonathan Martinez. He was a small favorite going up against, a top young up-and-comer, and he looked very impressive in this matchup. Looked great on the feet, hurt Jonathan Martinez, at least a couple times. It looked like he was running out of gas a little bit in the 3rd round, but then he hurts him, takes him down, and just, rides out the 3rd round. Wins all 3 rounds on the scorecards, 30-27, and, he's back. It sounds like he's a free agent. That was the last fight on his UFC contract. You'd assume he'd be re-signing with the UFC, but I'm sure, PFL, Bellator would love to have him. I'm sure they would, offer him a significant bag. But if he does stay in the UFC, I think there's a lot of fun fights out there for him. I'm not sure if he's competing at, the championship level in 5-round fights, against the Sean O'Malley's. You get up there with Marab, who we've already seen him fought, Corey Sandhagen. I don't know how well he's going to do against those guys, but I think pretty much anyone else in the division, especially in 3-round fights, I think he's very, very competitive. He's still so sharp. His longevity is so impressive, especially the fact that he's now down at 135. You're typically not seeing guys at that age have a ton of success, and the fact that he peaked so early on, right? It's not like he peaked in his early 30s like a lot of fighters. So a fun performance from Jose Aldo. It's always good to see him fight. The Brazilian fans absolutely love him. So, hopefully we see him back sometime soon. Hopefully he continues fighting, whether it's in the UFC or somewhere else, but just a great performance from Jose Aldo. Before the Jose Aldo fight, we had Anthony Smith taking on Vitor Petrino, and Anthony Smith was a massive dog in this fight. He was taking on an unranked dude. He was fighting back in the rankings, coming off a pretty brutal knockout loss. Vitor Petrino was undefeated in the UFC, crazy athletic, a ton of finishing ability, a top prospect in the light heavyweight division, and Anthony Smith, guillotine choke submission in the 1st round. This was good to see from Anthony Smith. He's had a rough run. I think he was 1 and 3 in his last 4 before this matchup. He gets a lot of heat from MMA fans. He does have some wild takes at times, but he does take a lot of heat from the community. So it was good to see him bounce back. A dude who's been at it for a very long time, back in the Strikeforce days. He talked about it in the post-fight. There was a clear experience gap between these two. Anthony Smith had that guillotine set up. Vitor Petrino still shot for the takedown. Anthony Smith locks it up, forces him to tap. So good to see Anthony Smith back here. I will say, though, light heavyweight is not the most stacked division, and with this kind of weird beef he has going on with Alex Pereira, I think he could reasonably be one fight away or one win away from getting a title shot. It might seem crazy because, he was just a massive dog to a dude who was unranked. But in a division without a ton of top contenders and the fact that there is some heat between these two, I do think one more win could end up getting him a title shot. Obviously, he has to string another one together here, but definitely, live again here in the 205 division. Before that matchup, we had Michel Pereira taking on Ihor Potieria. And I mean, Michel Pereira up at 185 is just an absolute monster. This dude is a physical freak. He goes out, he drops Ihor Potieria with a jab, then he backflips onto the dude, kind of hits him in the face with his shin a little bit, knee to the shoulder. I'm glad that didn't turn into a no contest because that was not the reason why he won that fight. But he backflips on the dude. They get to the feet, and then he ends up locking up a standing guillotine choke, gets the tap, but by the time the ref got there, dropped him, put him out cold on the canvas. Just a crazy win for Michel Pereira. 3 very, very fast wins up at 185. And, it seems like we're so far removed from the whole debacle with him missing weight against Wonderboy and then Wonderboy not taking the fight. And, Michel Pereira obviously wasn't looking great. The fans were not happy about that. But since he's kind of been forced up to 185, he's just been on an absolute tear. We need to see him fight in the rankings. He's got to be facing someone in the top 15 next. And I think everyone's going to be very excited to see him there. Ihor Potieria, he took a short notice opportunity. It didn't work out. This was a long shot. He was a huge dog. I'm sure he gained some favor with the UFC. So I'm sure he'll be back, get another opportunity here in the UFC. And then shifting into the final fight on the main card, we had Caio Borralho taking on Paul Craig. And we saw Caio Borralho deliver a pretty nasty knockout over Paul Craig. Looking back on it, it's kind of wild that Paul Craig has wins over Magomed Ankalaev and Jamal Hill, like just 2 elite 205ers. And then, he's kind of struggled against some lesser competition. The striking just really has not evolved. The chin's not great, and then he also just hasn't developed the wrestling to set up his great jiu-jitsu. So now that everyone knows that, you want no part of him on the ground, when he pulls guard, dudes just stand up. So he's kind of a one-trick pony at this point. It hasn't been great. Caio Borralho has been stacking wins. He's faced some, tough opponents outside the top 15. He should have the opportunity to continue to fight up at 185. This was, kind of a flashier finish. Some of his other performances haven't been as flashy, so hopefully this gets him the opportunity to continue to move up in the rankings. And then shifting into the prelims, in the featured prelim, we had Joanderson Brito taking on Jack Shore. It was a fun matchup, 2 pretty solid prospects in the featherweight division, and Joanderson Brito came out hot. It seemed like if Jack Shore was going to win this one, he was going to have to weather an early storm, potentially rely on Brito fading and then take over later on. We didn't get to see that because Joanderson Brito just absolutely beat up Jack Shore's legs, opened up a nasty cut on the shin, which I can't remember seeing a fight get stopped like that. There was some controversy on whether or not it should have been stopped. I don't know. That thing was nasty. It wasn't looking great for Jack Shore. Hypothetically, he could have come back, but it really was just a great performance from Joanderson Brito. He definitely deserves a shot at the rankings next. He's just been an absolute wrecking ball since getting into the UFC, so hopefully we see him fight in the top 15. He consistently is calling out Dan Ige, so maybe we see that fight get made, but I do believe Ige is coming off a W, so I'm not sure if he's going to want to fight outside the rankings. Before that one, we had a pretty fun fight between Orobai and Elvis Brenner. 2, pretty solid prospects here in the lightweight division. Elvis Brenner has had some big-time wins since coming into the UFC. A lot of people are very high on Orobai, and Orobai was looking dominant through the first 2 rounds. Looked like he was in a great spot. But he gave, Brenner a little bit of hope at the end of the second round. I think Brenner ended up mounting him, in the final seconds. Brenner comes out hot in the third round. Orobai ends up grabbing the fence, and it really didn't even prevent him from getting taken down, but he got the point taken. And I kind of agree with the call. I think fence grabbing is like the one foul where you're in complete control of it. Eye pokes, groin shots, weird things can happen, right? Someone changes their level, they move their head, they go right into you. Eye poking, kicking someone in the groin, it's not intentional. When you grab the fence, you are actively doing that. Like, no one's hand is getting stuck in the fence and then, your fingers are set up where you have to grip it. It's a conscious decision. Maybe they do it by mistake, but I feel like that's the one thing you can really kind of lock down on as a ref because it really can change the outcome of rounds. I was glad that this didn't end up costing him the fight, because Brenner winning like a close round 3 and then having the point deduction, that fight being a draw, would seem tough for Olobai considering how dominant he was in the first 2 rounds. But he ends up dropping Brenner in like the final seconds, which I think secured him that 3rd round, and he ends up winning a nice decision here. Definitely a strong prospect at lightweight. Showed, some flaws in the 3rd round, but he looked really impressive earlier on. Should just continue to get better moving forward. Before that, we had an awesome UFC debut from Mauricio Ruffy. Knocked out Jamie Malarkey, flying knee with some follow-up punches. Tough loss for Jamie here, but Ruffy just looked so sharp. Definitely someone to keep your eye on here in the 155-pound division. Called out Islam Makhachev, told me he was coming for that belt. I guess he beat someone from that camp in his Dana White Contender Series fight, but definitely a dude we should be looking out for moving forward. So overall, a pretty fun card. Definitely kind of, heated up on the main card. You had 3 straight finishes to start it off. And then a fun Jose Aldo decision win, and then a pretty fun flyweight main event. Those flyweight fights almost always deliver. So congrats to Alessandro Pantoja for retaining the belt. Jose Aldo's back. Like I said at the top, it wasn't a great fight card on paper. I don't think anyone was overly hyped about this, but that's kind of the result of having 299 be so stacked, 300 be so stacked, 302 should be solid, 303 with McGregor coming back. So if this is like the down pay-per-view, I think it played out well. Some fun fights. It was entertaining. That's really all you can ask for. So that's going to wrap it up for my recap. Let me know your thoughts about this card down below in the comment section. I'm going to be posting my predictions for next weekend's card, I think today also. And then I'll also be going through and matchmaking all the main card fighters on who they think they should be booked up against next. That'll probably be coming out on Monday. But thank you all for stopping by, and I will see you in the next one.